Hello folks. Before we start, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more such spine-chilling stories. Let's try to reach 100 subscribers. Thank you. Now let's begin. It started with a message I was never meant to receive. Late one night, I sat alone in my apartment, the dim glow of my laptop casting shadows on the walls. My inbox had been quiet for hours, the usual stream of work emails and spam slowing to a trickle. I had just about decided to shut the screen and head to bed when a notification popped up. Invitation to the garden. The subject line was simple, but there was something unsettling about it. I didn't recognize the sender, and there were no other details. Just those 4 words. I stared at it, my finger hovering over the delete button. But something held me back. Curiosity, maybe. Or something darker. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The email was sparse, containing nothing but a link and one line of text. Step inside, if you dare. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't one to get caught up in these kinds of things. I'd heard enough horror stories about phishing scams and viruses. But this felt different. This felt personal. The link itself was strange, long, garbled, with a .onion address at the end. A dark web link. I had only ever heard rumors of the dark web, whispered stories of hidden sites where illegal activities flourished unchecked. But I had never ventured there myself. Until now. I copied the link into the Tor browser, my hand shaking slightly as I hit enter. The screen went black for a moment before slowly loading. When it finally appeared, I was greeted by a simple page, a single image of an ornate iron gate, twisted and covered in dark vines, set against a backdrop of endless darkness. Below it, a single button glowed. Enter the garden. My chest tightened. There was something wrong about this. Every instinct screamed at me to close the window, to walk away, but I couldn't. Something had its grip on me, pulling me deeper into the abyss. I clicked the button. The screen flickered, and then I was inside. The page that loaded next was bare, save for a list of names. Hundreds of them, each one linked to a profile. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the names, but none of them meant anything to me. There was no context, no explanation for what this place was or why I had been invited. But then I saw it, my own name. I froze, my blood turning to ice. There it was, clear as day. My full name listed among the others. My hand hovered over the mouse, trembling as I clicked on it. A profile opened, stark and chilling. It contained a photo of me, a photo I didn't recognize, taken from an angle I had never seen. In the image, I was sitting at my desk, in the very room I was in now, staring at the same laptop. But the worst part wasn't the photo, it was the text below it. Condition, healthy, obedient, prime for extraction. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding in my chest, a scream rising in my throat. But before I could move, before I could even think, I heard something behind me, a whisper, low, barely audible, but unmistakable. Welcome to the garden. I shot up from my chair, my body trembling as I scanned the room. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. The whisper, was it in my head, or had someone really spoken? I couldn't tell, but every instinct told me I wasn't alone. My eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything, that could explain the voice. But there was nothing, just silence, thick and oppressive. I walked over to the window, pulling the curtains aside slightly to peer out. The street below was empty. No cars, no people, just the endless stretch of pavement and shadow. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That somewhere, in the darkness, eyes were fixed on me. Slowly, I opened the laptop again, my hands shaking. The screen flickered to life, The web page still open to my profile. The same haunting image of me sitting at my desk. The same chilling text beneath it. Prime for extraction. What did that even mean? Who had taken the photo? My mind raced with 1,000 questions, none of them with answers I wanted to know. I tried to close the tab, to erase everything, but no matter what I did, the browser wouldn't respond. The page was frozen, as if mocking me, reminding me that there was no escape. I reached for the power button, ready to force the laptop to shut down. But just as my finger hovered over it, the screen blinked, and a new message appeared. The watchers have eyes everywhere. My heart stopped. The message was short, but its meaning was clear. I wasn't just being watched online. They were watching me, right now, in real life. The chill in the air seemed to deepen, and I suddenly became hyper-aware of my surroundings. The walls felt closer, the shadows darker. My own breathing sounded too loud, too frantic. I shot up from the desk, pacing the room. There was no way this was real. It couldn't be. But the photo, the message, I couldn't ignore it. Someone knew where I lived. Someone had been inside my apartment, had taken that photo without me even realizing. I grabbed my phone, the urge to call the police rising. But as my fingers hovered over the dial pad, something stopped me. What would I even tell them? That I clicked on a dark web link, and now I felt like someone was watching me. It sounded insane. They wouldn't believe me. They'd write me off as some paranoid guy with an overactive imagination. But I knew better. I could feel it now. Someone was watching me, somewhere, beyond the walls of my apartment. Eyes were on me, tracking my every move, and no amount of logic or reason could shake that feeling. I sat down on the couch, my mind racing. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of the apartment, out of the city, as far away from this nightmare as possible. But even as I thought it, I knew it was too late. Whoever they were, they had already found me. Running wouldn't change that. The laptop pinged again. You can't hide from the watchers. I slammed the screen shut again, panic clawing at my throat. This was real. Too real. A sound echoed through the apartment. A creak. Soft but unmistakable. Coming from the hallway just outside my door. I froze. Every muscle in my body tensing. My eyes locked onto the door. Fear coursing through me. The sound came again, louder this time, closer. Someone was out there. I moved slowly, trying to keep my breathing under control as I approached the door. I pressed my ear against it, straining to hear, but there was only silence. Then, a knock. Soft at first, barely more than a tap. Then harder, more insistent. I stepped back, my heart slamming against my chest. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan, but I was paralyzed by fear. The knock came again, and this time, a voice followed it. Low, eerie. Open the door. The knock came again, sharper, more forceful. Open the door. The voice on the other side was calm, almost polite, but there was something in the tone that sent a chill down my spine. Whoever was out there wasn't just some stranger. They knew I was inside. They knew I was listening. They knew I was afraid. I took a step back from the door, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe I had let the paranoia get to me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something far more sinister was unfolding. Something I couldn't explain, and I was in the middle of it. The apartment was suffocatingly quiet, and the air seemed thick with an unseen presence. I could feel eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. The laptop's message had warned me. The watchers have eyes everywhere. And now, I knew. It wasn't just a threat. It was a fact. The knock came again, harder this time, more impatient. "We know you're in there." The voice was colder now, sharper, as if it was losing its patience. I swallowed hard, stepping further away from the door. My body was trembling, but I knew that opening the door was the last thing I should do. Whoever was out there wasn't here to talk. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking as I scrolled through my contacts. I needed to call someone, anyone, but as I tapped the screen, something strange happened. The screen flickered, then went black. No matter how hard I pressed the buttons, the phone wouldn't turn on. It was dead. My stomach churned with dread. I backed away from the door, my heart racing. I had never felt so trapped, so helpless. The thought of leaving the apartment crossed my mind, but where would I go? The watchers had found me. They had eyes on me. I couldn't outrun them, no matter where I went. A soft thud echoed from the window behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. The window was closed, the curtains drawn, but I could swear I saw a shadow move outside. Something tall, shifting in the darkness. I froze, staring at the window, my heart pounding in my ears. Suddenly, the door rattled violently, as if someone was trying to force their way inside. The polite knocking was gone, replaced by a frantic, urgent pounding. My blood ran cold. They were done waiting. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a heavy metal lamp from the side table, and held it in front of me like a weapon. My hands were shaking, and I knew that if they got through the door, I wouldn't stand a chance. But I wasn't going to let them take me without a fight. The door rattled again, harder this time, and I could hear the straining of the lock. My grip on the lamp tightened. I was shaking so badly that I could barely keep my hands steady, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to think and come up with a plan, but fear clouded every thought. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pounding stopped. Silence filled the apartment once more, thick and oppressive. My ears strained for any sound, but there was nothing. No movement, no voices, just nothing. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Every muscle in my body was tense, waiting for the next sound, the next clue that they were still out there. But the silence stretched on, growing heavier with each passing second. I slowly lowered the lamp, my pulse still racing. What was happening? Had they left? Or were they waiting for me to make the first move? My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. After what felt like an eternity, I took a cautious step toward the door. My hands were still trembling, and my knees felt weak, but I forced myself to move. I needed to know if they were still there. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear any sign of movement on the other side. But the hallway beyond was silent. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. I slowly reached for the peephole, my heart slamming against my chest. Maybe if I just looked, I could see if they were still there. Maybe it had all been a mistake, a sick joke, some twisted prank meant to terrify me. But as I leaned toward the peephole, the laptop pinged behind me. I froze. The screen, which I thought had shut off, was glowing again. My name flashed across the screen, but the message below it had changed. My stomach twisted as I read the words, "You shouldn't have looked." Before I could react, the door behind me burst open with a deafening crash. I was thrown backward, hitting the ground hard. The wind knocked from my lungs. The world spun around me, my vision blurring as I struggled to catch my breath. Pain shot through my body, but I forced myself to move, scrambling to my feet. The door hung open, swinging slightly from the impact, but there was no one there. No intruder, no shadowy figure, nothing but the cold, empty hallway beyond. But the fear was still there, clawing at my chest, making it hard to breathe. Someone had broken down the door, but they weren't there. How was that possible? I stepped toward the doorway, my hands shaking, my mind screaming at me to turn back. But something compelled me to look. Maybe it was the irrational hope that it had all been in my head. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself that there was nothing to fear. But when I reached the door and stepped into the hallway, I froze. The hallway was empty, just as I had expected, but written on the wall in dark, dripping letters was a single word: run. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't a prank. This was real. And whoever, or whatever, had written that message, they were toying with me. I turned back toward the apartment, but as I did, something else caught my eye. At the far end of the hallway, just out of reach of the dim light, a figure stood, tall, unmoving, watching. I couldn't make out their face, but I didn't need to. The sense of dread that washed over me was enough to tell me that this was one of them, one of the watchers. I backed into the apartment, my legs trembling beneath me. I grabbed my bag from the couch, barely aware of what I was doing. My mind was screaming at me to run, to get out of there, but my body felt numb, paralyzed by fear. I turned back toward the hallway, but the figure was gone. The message on the wall, however, still glistened. Run. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran. My feet pounded against the pavement, the cold night air biting at my skin as I sprinted down the street. My heart was racing, my mind a blur of fear and confusion. The watchers were real. I wasn't imagining it. And now, they were coming for me. The city felt foreign, like a twisted version of the place I had known all my life. The once familiar streets were distorted, the buildings looming like giants, casting long, menacing shadows. It was as if the entire world had turned against me, conspiring with the watchers to corner me, trap me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I wasn't sure where I was running to, just that I needed to get as far away from my apartment as possible. Every step felt like a race against the inevitable, like they were right behind me, watching, waiting for me to slip. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see them, their dark silhouettes looming in the distance. But the street behind me was empty, the shadows stretching out like hungry hands, reaching for me. I wasn't sure if that was more comforting or more terrifying. I turned down an alley, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The alley was narrow, the walls closing in on either side, and for a moment, I thought I had made a mistake. But I kept running, my feet barely touching the ground, as I pushed myself forward, deeper into the maze of the city. The alley opened up into a small courtyard, bathed in the dim light of a single flickering street lamp. The courtyard was empty, save for an old, rusted bench and a payphone that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. I slowed to a stop, my chest heaving as I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. For a moment, everything was still. The air was cold, silent, the only sound my labored breathing. I listened, straining for any sign that the watchers had followed me, but there was nothing, just the eerie stillness of the empty courtyard. Maybe I had lost them. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what had happened. The messages, the voice, the figure in the hallway. None of it made sense. Who were the watchers? What did they want with me? And why had I been chosen? I reached for my phone again, hoping that it had somehow come back to life. But when I pulled it from my pocket, the screen was still dead. No signal, no power, as if everything around me had been cut off, leaving me isolated, disconnected from the rest of the world. I needed help. I needed answers. But I was alone. My eyes flicked to the payphone, half hidden in the shadows of the courtyard. It looked ancient, like something from another time, but in my desperation, it felt like my only option. Maybe, just maybe, it still worked. I crossed the courtyard, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The payphone was cold to the touch, the metal slick with condensation. I lifted the receiver, half expecting nothing to happen, but to my surprise, there was a dial tone. It was faint, distorted, but it was there. I dialed the only number I could think of, 911. The phone rang once, twice, before clicking over to a harsh static. I pulled the receiver away from my ear, confused, but before I could hang up, a voice crackled through the line. "You can't run from them." I froze, my blood turning to ice. The voice was low, distorted, but there was no mistaking it. It was the same voice from my apartment, the same voice that had whispered through my door. "They're always watching." My hand trembled as I gripped the receiver, my mind screaming at me to hang up, to run, but I couldn't move. The voice had me trapped, paralyzed with fear. "You can't escape the garden." The static grew louder, the voice fading in and out, distorted by the interference. I felt like I was going to be sick. My head was spinning, my vision blurring as the weight of the words sank in. The garden, the dark website, the place where it had all started. "You're already part of it." The line went dead. I stood there, the receiver still clutched in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. The garden, that email, the link I had clicked on. I had opened a door I was never meant to, and now I was trapped inside, unable to escape. I slammed the receiver down, my hands shaking as I backed away from the phone. The world around me felt like it was closing in, the walls pressing against me, suffocating me. I needed to get out. I needed to find help. But there was no help. Not anymore. Suddenly, a shadow moved at the far end of the courtyard. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My eyes locked onto the figure standing in the darkness, half hidden by the shadows. It was tall, unnaturally still, its face obscured by the dim light. But I knew who it was. I could feel it in my bones. A watcher. My pulse quickened as I took a step back, my legs trembling beneath me. The watcher didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, watching, waiting. I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away, to put as much distance between myself and that thing as possible. My feet pounded against the pavement, my lungs burning as I raced through the twisting streets. The world around me, a blur of shadows and fear. But no matter how fast I ran, I could still feel it. The eyes, always watching, always waiting. I turned down another alley, the narrow space closing in around me. My body was screaming for me to stop, but I couldn't. If I stopped, they would catch me. If I stopped, it would all be over. The alley opened up into a dead end. My heart sank as I skidded to a stop, my back pressing against the cold brick wall. There was no way out, no escape. And then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. I looked up, my breath catching in my throat. At the entrance to the alley stood the watcher, tall, imposing, its face still hidden in the shadows, but I could feel its gaze on me. burning into me like a brand. It didn't speak. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart slamming against my chest. This was it. I was trapped. There was nowhere left to run. The watcher took a step forward, its movement slow, methodical. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. I squeezed my eyes shut, my body trembling with fear. I didn't want to see what was coming. I didn't want to know what they were going to do to me. But just as the watcher reached the center of the alley, it stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, in a voice that was barely more than a whisper, it spoke. "The garden never lets you go." And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished. The watcher had vanished, but the fear remained, rooted deep in my chest, twisting tighter with each breath. The alley was silent now, empty, but the weight of its presence still pressed down on me like a suffocating shroud. I stumbled forward, my legs weak, my mind spiraling. Had I imagined it? Was this all some twisted hallucination? The result of clicking on that cursed link? But no, I knew better. This was real. Too real. The watchers were out there waiting for the moment I let my guard down, waiting for me to stumble one more time. I had to get out of the city. I had to disappear. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and began walking, forcing myself to move through the labyrinth of dark streets and alleys, my eyes darting constantly, scanning for any sign of movement. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every distant sound sent a spike of terror through me. They were watching. I could feel it, even though I couldn't see them. After what felt like an eternity of wandering, I found myself in the industrial part of town, where the buildings were derelict and the streets were deserted. It was the perfect place to hide, or so I thought. I found a rundown warehouse, its windows boarded up, the entrance barely more than a cracked door. I slipped inside, the darkness swallowing me whole as the cold, musty air wrapped around me like a blanket. I wasn't sure how long I could stay here or what my next move would be, but at least for now, I was hidden. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, my body trembling with exhaustion. My mind raced, trying to piece together everything that had happened. The garden, the messages, the watchers. It all led back to that one fateful click. I pulled out my laptop again, half expecting it to be dead, like my phone. But to my surprise, the screen flickered to life. The dark web browser was still open, and there it was, the same page that had started it all. "The garden welcomes you." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting in knots. Part of me wanted to shut the laptop and throw it across the room, to rid myself of whatever dark power it held over me. But another part of me, some deep, irrational part, knew I couldn't stop. I needed answers. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the trackpad. Then, against my better judgment, I clicked the link again. The page reloaded, the familiar iron gate appearing on the screen, covered in twisting vines. The words beneath it flashed once more. "Enter the garden." My chest tightened, the same dread washing over me as the first time I had seen it. I should have closed the laptop. I should have walked away. But I couldn't. I needed to know. I needed to understand why this was happening to me. I clicked the button. The screen flickered, and then I was back inside. The list of names appeared again. Hundreds of them, all lined up like an inventory. And there, buried among the others, was my name. But this time, something had changed. I clicked on my name, my hands shaking as the profile opened. The photo was still there. The The same chilling image of me sitting at my desk, unaware of the danger that lurked just beyond the screen. But the text beneath it had been updated. Condition: prime for collection. Extraction imminent. My blood turned to ice. The laptop pinged again, and a new message appeared on the screen. You have been chosen for the final harvest. I dropped the laptop, my heart slamming against my chest. Final harvest? What did that mean? I backed away from the screen, my mind racing. The watchers weren't just observing, they were preparing to take me. And if I didn't act now, it would be too late. Suddenly, the warehouse door creaked open behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. A shadow moved in the doorway, tall, looming, its face obscured by the darkness. My heart pounded in my ears as I backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The figure stepped inside, its movements slow, deliberate. I could feel its gaze on me, piercing through the darkness, and I knew without a doubt that this was a watcher. No mask this time, no disguise, just the cold, silent presence of something far more terrifying than I had imagined. I pressed myself against the wall, my body trembling with fear. "What do you want from me?" I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. The watcher didn't respond. It took another step closer, its silhouette looming over me like a shadow of death. "Please," I whispered, my throat tight. "Why me?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then, in a voice as cold as the grave, it spoke. "You opened the door. You invited us in." Tears welled in my eyes as I sank to the floor, my body trembling. This was it. There was no escape, no running from them. The moment I had clicked on that link, I had sealed my fate. The watcher stepped closer, its hand reaching out toward me, the shadows curling around its fingers like smoke. My breath caught in my throat, and I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But instead of the cold touch of death, I heard something else. A sound, faint at first, but growing louder. A low hum, like the static from a broken radio. I opened my eyes, confused, and saw the laptop screen flickering wildly. The page of the garden was distorting, glitching, as if something was interfering with the connection. The watcher paused, its hand lowering as it turned toward the laptop, its body stiffening. The static grew louder, more chaotic, and suddenly, the screen went black. A new message appeared, written in bold, white letters. "You're not alone." The watcher hissed, its body recoiling from the message, and for the first time, I saw something in its stance. Fear. It backed away from the laptop, its form flickering like a bad signal on an old TV. Another message flashed across the screen. "Run." Without thinking, I scrambled to my feet, my body moving on pure instinct. I darted past the watcher, my heart racing as I bolted toward the door. Behind me, the static grew louder, the sound almost deafening as I ran into the night. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just kept running, my mind a whirlwind of terror and confusion. What had just happened? Who had sent that message? And why had the watcher backed down? I didn't stop until I was halfway across the city, my legs burning, my lungs aching for air. I stumbled into a park, collapsing onto a bench, my body trembling with exhaustion. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The garden, the watchers, the final harvest. None of it made sense, and yet, it was all too real. But one thing was clear. I wasn't alone. Someone, or something, had intervened. Someone had saved me, and whoever they were powerful enough to stop the Watchers. But for how long? As I sat there, catching my breath, the laptop in my bag pinged again. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. But after a moment, I pulled it out and opened the screen. A new message was waiting for me. You're safe for now, but they won't stop. The garden never lets you go. My hand shook as I read the words, the weight of their meaning settling over me. The Watchers would come again. They always did. But now, I had a chance. A sliver of hope. I wasn't sure who had helped me or why, but I knew one thing. I wasn't ready to be harvested. Not yet.